got Mr. Joe Lansdale here. Hello, Joe. How are you?
How are you?
And then the Summers Brothers. The Summers Brothers, filmmakers extraordinaire.
We made it.
I appreciate it. Apologies from Jason Murphy, who was very excited to be here this week, and then he came down with something this morning.
No.
He said,
well, soon, Jason.
Yeah.
He says that he doesn't think it's corona, but it's sore throat and all that, so we're hoping for the best. Anyway, he was very apologetic about it.
Can't tell till you got it.
Very true. Very true. So first off, before we really start going anywhere with this, I want to know, Joe, how are you holding up during this whole isolation, during this whole event, during this whole 2020?
Well, that's the way I live anyway, pretty much. I do get a lot of travel. We do a lot of overseas travel to sign books in Italy and France and Germany. They send us over there, the publishers, and then we travel on by ourselves. In fact, we were in China in November. We were there a month in Wuhan and different places like that. So we didn't know anything about a virus, and nobody was talking about it in November. So we travel a lot. So that's different. But basically, this is what I do. I work at home. I miss my martial arts classes that I teach, and I miss, going to the bookstore and restaurants from time to time. But essentially, I get up and I work in the mornings, and then I have time to read, watch movies, do a little exercise, and hang out. So it's really not so bad for me, and it almost makes me feel guilty for others because I live out in the woods. I mean, we live out. We got about 10 acres of trees and woods and pond and animals all over the place, and it's backed up against more woods. So I feel that I'm fortunate, considering the situation for a lot of people.
I know you were teaching martial arts classes, correct?
Still, yeah, I still do. I teach only private classes. I teach one class a week, and I miss it. I've been doing this as my 58th year as a martial artist, And,
wow. Congrats.
Well, for what it's worth, I'm in a couple of martial arts Hall of Fame. So,
Wow.
Yeah, as Bruce Campbell said, don't fuck with this guy. Which I love. In fact, that's one of the things we're talking about today is the quote where I heard that. I'm sure he probably said it before. There's a documentary coming out by the Squee Project, which is a media network supporting representation, feminism, and diversity in pop culture. And they made, man, what an honor. They made a documentary about you and your life, Joe.
Yeah, I must have been at the bottom of the barrel, ran out of stuff, but they did make it, and it's been showing at film festivals and to quite some acclaim. And I say that for Hansi Oppenheimer, who made the documentary, who directed it, because she really worked hard and she made it on a shoestring and a frayed one at that, and she made it. I don't know how she accomplished what she did with what she had, and that includes me. But she did get it made, and it's been very popular. I'm proud of that, and I'm really proud for her.
Yeah, it's exciting that we saw you last time we saw you was at the premiere here. They did a little private premiere that Rick Claw dragged me along from our mutual friend.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. So how did I can't imagine what that's like. I mean, it's embarrassing enough to have like a surprise party, but to be like, hey, do you mind sitting here while we all watch this movie about how great you are?
Well, yeah, and it's a little embarrassing to even have a movie made about you, but I'm getting over it. I'm starting to feel pretty good about it. But it's nice. I think the thing about it is that I've been around long enough now that I'm part of pop culture, and that's strange to me, because in many areas, and you just start to become kind of enfolded into popular culture, and that's unique because when you're a kid, or at least me, when I wanted to write books and stories and and make films and things like that, I had every intention of doing it, but to look up now with a career that's been, a long career now, and one that's still going on, I look back at it amazed and excited because I've never grown jaded by it. I am fascinated with creativity, and I've never been someone that I never got into it to make a lot of money and to be famous or anything like that. I wanted to make a living, but I always thought I would have to make a living doing something else and write on the side. And it didn't work that way. I was able to go into being a full-time writer after several years, of course, but 81, I've been a full-time writer since 81, selling since 73. I worked in rose fields, potatoes, aluminum chair factories, janitor, all that stuff until I could go full-time. And, you know, I didn't get a college education. I don't have creative writing courses, film courses, any of that stuff. Never saw a screenplay and sold my first one, just figuring out how to do it and came pretty damn close. And it optioned 11 times, and finally they gave me $250,000 and never made it. So
what was that?
But, you know, Dead in the West. Dead in the West.
No
and
kidding.
It was like an early, based on an early novel of mine. So, but what I'm saying is that I look at all that, and I've had success, and I've had great happiness. And, you know, there have been some tough times because it can be that way. But on the whole, it's just been amazing. I just think, how do I deserve all this? I keep thinking one morning I'm going to get up and there'll be somebody knock on the door and go, hey, man, I'm sorry to tell you this, but we meant the other Joe Lansdale.
Or they knock on the door and you wake up and you're 16 again and none of your life has happened and you get to do it all again.
That's more.
You're like, oh no.
Well, you know, you make mistakes and all, and I wouldn't, if I was going to do it all over again, obviously I wouldn't do exactly the same way because I'd know some of the pitfalls. But what would be ideal is if you could be 35 or 40 for on and on and on and on. In other words, physically and mentally. That would be the trick. Yeah. But as you get older, you begin to say, yeah, my time's coming. I can get out of here. It'll be all right. I'm in no hurry, don't get me wrong, but I've got plenty to do. But there will come that time. And I think that's what happens when you get older. You finally get to that point where you go, man, it's time.
Yeah, I wonder about that all the time because it wasn't 10 years ago that I was like, I don't care what anybody says. I have no plans on ever dying. And now 10 years later, I'm like, looking at coffins online.
Yeah. But, you know, I mortality quite early in my life. I sort of knew that. I mean, you know it even more as you begin to experience certain, you know, changes in your life and in your body and loss of friends and things like that. And I'm not trying to be morbid here. I mean, that's just the cycle. And but the thing is that I realized it very much so, the mortality of it, when I was in my early 20s and mid 20s. I'm not exactly sure why. There are a couple of moments that I think may have contributed to that. But I just always said, okay, I don't believe in an afterlife. I'm an atheist. And I just said, when this is over with, you know, it's they wipe your ass and put you in a coffin, or in my case, I'm going to be cremated, and they may not even wipe my ass. Why bother, right? And so the thing is that, you know, I always just said, enjoy every day, enjoy what you do, try your best to treat people well, which, you know, you don't always achieve, but I think I've tried very hard. And I think that's the best you can do, and enjoy what you're doing and not do it for prosperity, but do it for yourself. Maybe that will, in fact, lend itself a little prosperity.
Do you think that viewpoint informs your work?
Yes. Yes. And it's funny because a lot of my work's very, very dark. So I think some people might not think that's informative of that, but I think it's just the opposite. I think it's a way to inoculate yourself against the darkness that you cannot defeat. You cannot defeat it. And I mean, there's some people that believe they're going to, you know, go somewhere and play a harp or whatever it is. And, you know, I don't see any evidence of that being true. Whatever religion, all religions seem like horse shit to me. But if people if they want to believe that and makes them happy, I've got no problem with it. But don't lay that crap on me, you know, and don't try to use it to beat me over the head with, for politically, education wise, whatever way, because, you know, to me, it's illogical. But and I'm not meaning to step on anybody's toes here. If I'm talking to religious people, well, it's okay. Fuck you.
Right. I always say, like, I don't mind debating with you the idea of like consciousness after death, but if your evidence involves words written in a source book for your religion, then our discussion is over, because that's not evidence.
Well, if you're using your religion to support your religion, then it's not very, you know, convincing. You know, it's like, well, what the Bible says, well, yeah, but, you know, the Quran says, or this says. So And then some people say, usually what happens is they get cornered with that idea. I just have to believe it on faith. And I always say, well, faith, a lot of people have faith. There are people still to this day that have faith that the world is flat, but they are wrong. There are people, because it's provable. And there are people who have on different religions that they have exactly the same faith, that their religion is right. So which faith do I have to, if it's on faith, why do I have to accept your faith? I might think you're an asshole. I think you have all that much interesting faith. You might, I can see somebody having hope that it's true, but I don't even have that because the idea doesn't even appeal to me.
Well, yeah, most of the arguments I've heard for what happens don't sound all that actually appealing. In fact, the whole we become one, we lose ourselves and become one with them. Well, then what's the point? Because
what the hell? What happened to me?
I want the one where I finally get to have sex with a girl I had a crush on in 9th grade, and
I think you become part of just whatever's left because we come out of stars. We're made from starlight and all that. I mean, that's just science, and you probably go back to that, but it's not you. It's that transitional thing that made you, but it's not like you're going to have good memories of that time at the drive-in theater, or when you read a great book, or when you had great sex, or you had a tremendous fight and won, physical fight and won. All that stuff's gone. And you're just some, cosmic bullshit. And as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't, that, and I believe that's what happens. You just become part of it, but you're not you anymore. That's not a personal consciousness or a consciousness at all, perhaps. Now,
all that being said, that idea that recently has been coming up more and more in science fiction. In fact, even Black Mirror, the show, did an episode based on it, of having your consciousness uploaded into a completely realistic simulation of reality of whatever you would want it to be. I'm like, yeah, sign me up for that shit.
Right. Yeah. No, I understand that. That would be interesting. Yeah. Unless they make bad shit.
Would you, if they did that, if they offered that to you, would you want to be in a reality with some of your creations?
Oh, hell no. Some of them, some happen. I can handle Happen Leonard, but some of the others, like the God of the Razor, and some of the other stuff, no.
The Joe Lansdale averse.
On the drive-in.
How long did they?
Hotel? No.
Well, how long did they follow you around for the documentary? How long were they film you?
Hansi, I think she did 4 or 5 days, but we'd also had talks and things, and so she had a lot of preparatory material. And I took her to my hometown, and we spent a lot of hours. I mean, we spent full days, but I was amazed that she was able to get that much out of that short of time. But she went into it with a very specific angle that she wanted to go at, which was, primarily things like the drive-in and stuff like that, and how it influenced, or what influenced me to write those things and how it influenced the rest of my career. And it was very much about my family and how our family has we're all very tight. My wife and I and our children, we're close, and we're all in this business in one form or another, somewhat different to some degree. Like my son has a film coming out next month called The Pale Door that he co-wrote, which is a weird Western. And he's a co-writer on that. I helped produce it a little. It has a couple of the actors from Happen Leonard in it, like Bill Sage and Pat Healy. It's sort of those things that we have this kind of, I don't know what you would say, a kind of blend of personalities and yet our own personalities as well, which is not to say that we're always, happy around each other, but we're like you guys. We love each other. We get along with each other, and we squabble sometimes like we're
right.
I love your family, by the way. They're so great. I love most of the time when I've seen you, at least some of them are around. Like Casey and I hit it off quite a bit. I've told the story 100 times about her advising us to go to a hamburger joint when we were going through Nashville over Twitter. And then we're there and sitting down to eat, and our burgers had just arrived. And she sends a text going, I probably should have told you a week ago the owner killed himself in the kitchen right after murdering his wife.
Well, was it good though? Did you?
Yeah, how was the burgers?
Pretty good.
Really good burgers. Yeah.
I can't remember the name of that joint, but I remember her talking about it when she lived in Nashville.
Yeah, it was. I waited till dinner was over to tell my wife. Helps with the digestion, learning that you just ate murder.
You know,
murder.
even my niece, you know, she used to be a homicide detective, and she was on TV. She had a show called Lone Star Justice with her partners, the three of them, and it went a whole season. You know, so even she got involved in that. And she's working in ideas with film and stuff like that. And my niece is probably only about 10 years younger than me, maybe a little more than that, 10 or 12. So it's and my brother's written novels and comics. He used to write for Tales from the Crypt, the last version of it. Yeah, that's it, Tales from the Crypt, right?
God, I need some of your DNA. Your family clearly has got something going on.
Yeah, this is the thing I was talking about. Yeah, this is the one he did. This particular.
Oh, cool.
You know, incarnation of it, because there've been several.
And speaking of that sort of thing, you actually did a Creepshow episode recently for Shudder, correct?
Well, what happened is they made a Creepshow episode out of a story that my daughter, son, and I wrote together when they were 8 and 12, and they yeah, damn them. And so I thought, this is a good idea, guys. Let's write this down. And we wrote a story, and we sold it to an anthology for young adults from Random House. You know, first crack out of the box, they sold stuff, and you know, been selling stuff ever since. And Keith writes comics and screenplays and scripts. He has one under option right now that I'm supposed to direct, and probably would have we not had this virus. You know, I was supposed to have a film made with Peter Dinklage of my novel, The Thicket, and the virus canceled that as well. And so, you know, you always got these big plans, but the thing is that they're very creative, and they do have a lot of different things. And my daughter is best known as a professional singer and songwriter.
So you were going to direct a project that was next on the list. So is this your crack at directing, or have you been trying to get this going for a while?
Well, we've been trying to get it going for a while, but every time we start to do it, we have some kind of disaster. Once it was a financial disaster with the people. Yeah, if you've been in film long enough, that happens there. But they're going to put the money in, and then they don't. But this happened was we were getting to the point where we really had what looked like, you know, you don't know, but it looked like sufficient backing. And then, of course, the virus hit, and there's not a lot moving forward right now. It's just not happening. I'm hoping that it will, and I'm hoping that Dinklage will do the other project, The Thicket, later. But you know, I'm philosophical about it. I mean, if I never direct, I'm just as happy, and if I direct, I'm probably a little more happy. You know?
That's definitely true.
You left your mark for sure, one way or the other. Like it.
Yeah, you know. I mean, that's the thing is that I'm a novelist and a short story writer. And, you know, I've written comics. I've wrote Batman, the animated series, Superman, the animated series. And, you know, I've done all those kinds of things. So I'm constantly excited about it, but it's not like I'm missing out. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, at least from my own standpoint.
I consider you the father of the modern conception of the weird Wild West, quite frankly. I think that
might be true, you know, and I don't know that you know, certainly I didn't invent the form, but I think I made it a lot more popular. It was pretty well dead until I started doing it in the early 80s. And also I did the stuff I used to call absurdist fiction, which a lot of that developed in what they call bizarro fiction. And I've been very fortunate in that I've had some creations that have influenced things, and I'm happy about that. And as I've worked in other forms of other people's sandboxes, like Batman, Tarzan, Lone Ranger, all those different things, I've had those opportunities.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you real quick while you were talking about movies that didn't quite happen with Bubba Nosferatu, Curse of the She-Vampire, because everything I've seen 5 different explanations for why that didn't happen, and none of them are the same.
I didn't want to do it. I didn't think it was a great idea, but I think Bruce and Don were going to do it, and then later Bruce decided he didn't want to do it. I think he came to agree with me we didn't really need it. I did write a prequel novel to it called Bubba and the Cosmic Bloodsuckers, which is a lot of fun. It was made into a comic, and there was also an Evil Dead Bubba Hotep crossover comic that probably was inspired by the other one. And there, as far as I'm concerned, there'll never be one. But Don actually owns the rights. He could always get an actor and screenplay writer or do a television series, which I thought might have been kind of fun, a television series where, Bubba Nosferatu and then take it from there and have Elvis solve different, supernatural events and problems. But in another way, I really don't care about that as happening, because I think the original story is really a story I'm happy with, and I think the original film is a little classic in its own way.
You always go with you always go the Michael Caine perspective on it. They're like, oh, did you watch the show based on your original thing? He's like, no, I did not. I've been on the boat that the money bought from it, though, and that was great.
Well, I love film, so I love to see the films, And I've been very fortunate. I've been one of the few people so far. I figured that I can bend over and take a fucking here in a little while, because it's going to happen. But what I had is when they did Cold in July, based on my novel with Michael C. Hall and Don Johnson and Sam Shepard. Fantastic. I just wonderful. And then they did the Hap and Leonard TV series. They did 3 seasons. Also very good. They made changes here and there, of course, but it was so close to what I did, at least and when it was in flavor. I always hate it when they say we're going to make it in the spirit of, because already then I'm going, oh god damn,
it's set in space.
Give me the Vaseline, I'm greasing up, because you're going to get it most of the time. But in this case, they really kind of did that, and they did that with the Hap and Leonard series as well. And, the incident on and off a mountain road that Don did for Showtime for Masters of Horror, I thought it was very close to the story, very good. And the changes they made, I thought were great, because I don't mind changes when they make sense, but there's nothing worse in the entire world than a writer's room, And I love the TV era right now, because you can do so many different things. But independent film, that you don't have as many cooks. It's like Sam Shepard had when we were on Cold in July, and everybody was kind of going over something. Sam went outside, and I said, "What's going on, Sam?" He said, "Too many cooks." And I think that's the problem. A writer's room, just a bunch of people with their own ideas that they're trying to, sort of like you got a Chevrolet there, and they want to jack it up and drive a Ford under it and tell you it's a Jeep. And I get sort of worn out with that, because that's not creativity. That's not trying to improve something or express something. That's trying to get your idea out there so you can say, that part where the dog pees on the fire hydrant, that's mine. And the whole thing would have collapsed. It would have been a terrible movie had we not had that peeing scene. And you got 5, 7 people around a table, and they've all got that ambition. And instead of trying to, the best stuff is when they try to say, how can we make this like the writer's work? And, knowing that certain things are not going to translate literally, but how can we make this like the writer's work? It's like Bill Paxton and I, bless him. I loved Bill so much. I miss him. But we had the Bottoms that we were doing. And we had, Brent Hanley wrote the screenplay. He had written Frailty before for Bill, who directed it. And they were working very much, there were differences, but it was, I felt like when I read that screenplay, this is my novel, and that's what you're looking for, I think. And that's how film can be disappointing to me. And I always hate it when they say, well, we wanted to, make it different because everybody had read the book. Everybody didn't read the book. More people see one TV show than all your books put together. And I sell a lot of books. Right. I make a living at this, a comfortable one. But still, people are lazy. Books require 50% of you, where a TV, you and a brick can do about the same thing. The brick can sit on the couch and you can sit on the couch. Yeah. And the brick is smarter. But the thing is when a book or a story, you create something that makes people create the other 50%. Film isn't like that. It's not that it doesn't create something. It's not that I don't love it, but it's a different thing. And so to try to find that marriage between film and prose takes somebody that gives a shit, and a lot of times you have people, I've always wanted to make a movie with a helicopter in it, and they're just waiting to option something so they can put a fucking helicopter in it, which I really had happen. Thank God it didn't get made, So to me, that's not, why option something? make up your own fucking story. Am I getting angry here? Yeah, a little bit. But like I say, I've been fortunate, and you're hearing it from the fortunate guy. But that's the stuff that didn't get made or almost got made. I thought, what the hell? You know, why didn't you just call it something else and make up your own damn story instead of, you know, ruining mine? But I say all that, and if I sign on the dotted line, it's yours. You know, right. That don't mean I'm going to be necessarily happy with it, but I'm not going to stand. And you know, when they were doing the Hap and Leonard series, the first season when I was there all the time, you know, if I had a complaint or something I thought could be better, I told them. And what I always said is that I had the absolute right to say anything I wanted to do as a producer, and they had the absolute right to ignore the hell out of me, which they mostly did. And on the whole, they made the right choices, you know, but that isn't always the case. And then they did listen to me on.
Were you ever involved directly in the writing of one of the adaptations of one of your projects with having to deal with that other writers trying to tell you how it should be?
Oh, yeah. I wrote one of the scripts for the second season, and it turned out quite well. But, you know, you're getting all these things. Here's what's happening. And sometimes you say, look, if you do this, and it's hard for people that don't write and don't understand story structure sometimes to understand. If you pull this brick out, and then you pull this brick out, and you put this brick in because you like the way it looks, but it doesn't fit right, the whole damn thing wobbles, you know? And it's hard to tell a lot of writers that in like a writer's room, because most of them are not great writers anyway. And I'm not necessarily talking about the people I worked with. I'm talking about in general how this works and the people that I know that have worked in the field. I was fortunate, but it's hard in some of the things that didn't get made. I was glad because they didn't understand story. And people think, well, I'll just make this what I want. You know, I can do anything with it. But if film is about anything, it's about structure. You know, unless you're doing something totally avant-garde, you know, It's about structure. And if you have structure, you can mess with it a little more, but you can get too, you know, lackadaisical with that and have the whole thing fall down or be disappointing. And then you have the guys, well, what happened? You're an idiot. What happened?
Do you approach how you write anything differently if you're writing a screenplay versus a novel versus a comic book? I mean, obviously you're talking about structures is similar, but do you think of it in a different way for each medium?
In one way I do, in that obviously I know that if I'm writing a script that it's what you see, you know, you don't have the advantage, at least not to any real great manner, to go inside people's heads and tell you everything they're thinking and to give you all of their past and things that you can do with a novel. You can take 500 pages, and if you want to tell about their life, you can. Well, you can do some of that in film. You can do flashbacks, or you can just show it happen in sequence and all that. But that's not what a film is about. A film's about structure. And I've always been a little different in that I think you can have longer talking head scenes if the talk is interesting. If it's not just, well, Bob, as you know, the television works like this. If you turn this on, you know, and I've seen stuff like that where you're thinking, what are you doing? You're explaining to me stuff that anybody knows or doesn't really want to know or need to know. But when I sit down, I'm aware of that. For example, with film, I'm aware that it's a visual medium. And I'm aware that dialogue needs to be sharp, crisp, and interesting, which I try to do in my books as well. But there is that difference in that sense. I also know it's beat the clock, because when I write a novel, I can go over a little bit if I want to. But if I've got 90 minutes, and also money, you know, comes into this, and the weather comes into this. So I understand those kind of problems in filmmaking, because that's reality. Or you have some actor that just decides, I don't want to play it that way. You know, I have this vision of my own.
Right.
And some of that is absolutely necessary, because a good actor, like you take James Purefoy, he knows that goddamn character better than I do time he gets through thinking about it, or Michael K. Williams, you know, those guys know their stuff, and they can give it a depth that's different. It doesn't mean it's a greater depth than what you created in a book necessarily, but sometimes it's taking the elements of a screenplay and instead of just, you know, performing the scene, they know something's going on in the scene other than the scene. And that's different writing. If it's just the scene, doesn't mean much. But if something's going on in that scene that you don't have to spell out, and you have an actor that can give you that, like those two guys, you know, then, or Sam Shepard, or so many different people that have, like Bruce Campbell, one of the most underrated actors ever, you know, Ossie Davis, God's sakes. But see, those guys are giving it something of themselves. Now that's different. But when you have somebody that comes on and just says, I just want to do this different because they just want to, you know, show how powerful they are and that they can control the scene, then you're ruined. I mean, if I had my choice, I would work with nobody but friends. I would work with nobody but, you know, I wouldn't work with many big name actors. Not that I'm choosing to do that anyway or getting that opportunity. But I don't want Brad Pitt, great an actor as I think he is. I don't want those guys. I want the Nick Demichis. You know, I want the people that have been in films, but people, you know, oh, that guy, you know, or that lady, or whatever. You know, I want people that I know are great at what they do, but aren't necessarily known for everything else that they've done, you know. But that doesn't necessarily sell pictures.
Joe, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your writing habits, your process, just on a day-to-day basis, what you do to get in your mindset and start writing, and how you think about it.
Well, if I have a lot of bills due, I find it very inspiring, you know. No, the truth is I work every morning. You know, I very rarely take off, and I very rarely want to take off, but I only work 3 hours a day. I get up in the morning and I make coffee, and sometimes I get, you know, a piece of toast or something like that. I come upstairs where I am right now, and I sit down, and I usually check my email, maybe look at the fan page on my Facebook to answer stuff. You know, I don't have a Facebook page. I have a fan page on Facebook. And then I sit down and start writing. And then 3 hours later, just like, you know, it'll just cut off. And every once in a while, I'll come back and work a little bit. But I remind myself of a mule I used to have that I plowed. And we would be plowing along, and the mule about would stop, and it would look back at me, and I knew it was noon. I knew it was time to go to the barn, eat lunch, and then feed the mule, eat lunch, and brush the mule down, then come back, put the harness and put, you know, the hames and everything back on it and go back out. Well, that's kind of how I am. After about 3 hours, it's like I'm looking around, what's going on, man? But in that 3 hours, what is weird for me, I have a sort of plan is I need to get 3 to 5 pages a day, finished pages. You know, I don't do multiple drafts and all that stuff. It's a little different with screenplays. I'll get to that in a minute, but if you care, I mean, you know.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
But what I do is that I write and I correct as I go. But I might get that 3 to 5 pages easy, and then sometimes today I did 12, and I still did it in the same amount of time. I did 30 one day, 3 hours. It's like I'm juiced, I'm ready. And of course, some pages are more dialogue than others, so you have more white space. So you're covering more pages, but not necessarily in the same way you might have done the day before, when you may have had more, you know, just pure prose on the page, not necessarily dialogue. But that 3 hours a day gives me time to, you know, I produce 50 novels, 40 short story collections, the one coming out. I've written, probably sold 15, 16 screenplays, 4 for Batman and 1 for, you know, Superman, and then for the Hap and Leonard series, and, you know, on and things like that, because I show up. And that's the trick. The guys that are waiting for the muse, well, you are your muse. You're it. You're it. Who are you waiting on? You're it. Yeah. You know, I don't believe there's some kind of creative little wing god coming down and going, now I have the job today and I've got it. And you're waiting on that. And all the days that it doesn't feel right, you don't get anything done. But when I show up, I start finding that the muse shows up more, because I've opened that door. I've encouraged it. I said, come on in. And so when the muse comes in daily, every day feels great. And I know that some days I feel like you're more on a high, a creative high, than others. But when I compare that to the days when I'm not on the creative high, they're about the same quality, which I like to think is a high quality. You just feel better that day. You just may be enjoying yourself better that day, but you're not necessarily creating any better. In fact, sometimes it's not as good, because you're just, man, I know what I'm doing today, you know? And so when I get through with it, I do one polish on it and I'm done. Now, I've had some exceptions, but that's generally it. I don't outline, I don't plot, I don't do any of that stuff. Now, when I've done Scripts, it's a little different because I have that beat the clock problem,
Right.
And sometimes, like when I did Batman the Animated Series, they would send me this layout. So this is the story you want to tell, and we're picking you because we think you're the guy, which probably meant they couldn't get anybody else. So I took it and wrote scripts, and and I was able to write my own dialogue, my own scenes. I just kept it within that structure of what they wanted for their storyline.
So do you ever, when you're like doing that, your way of writing, do you ever sit down and go, I'm gonna write, but I can't write on this thing I'm supposed to be writing, and just say fuck it? Or do you just write anyway and like free write and just force it?
I don't ever feel like I'm forcing, it's I like doing it, but there are days, sometimes days when I just say, I feel like working on something else today, and I'll work on a short story. But I'll often work for, I've been writing, and in 2 hours I've got my pages, my 3 to 5 or more, and I've got another hour, and I'll just go in and click on a short story I'm working on and play with that for a while, or maybe something, a script or something, or an article. I also write a lot of nonfiction and essays and articles and things like that. So I usually have more than one thing going, and I have what my major project is, and then I have the smaller projects. I drive the big truck, and then I have the little Volkswagen over here, so I've always got something going. And sometimes that Volkswagen will turn into the truck because I'll finish this and take that up. And sometimes I'll stall and write a short story, maybe spend a week or 2 weeks on that, and then go back to the novel. And that also depends on contracts and when things are due. There's a difference in being a dilettante writer and a professional writer. I have to show up. It's what I do. Damn, what a wonderful job.
Yeah. So do you hold yourself to 3 hours? I'm going to sit here and I'm going to type and I'm going to work on something.
What happened because I've done it so many years. I never have to say, I don't set a clock. I don't write out, rules and things like that, because that just bores me. What I do is I keep a notepad so I can remember what color somebody's eyes in, or I forget somebody's name. That's a peripheral character. Who was that? Was it Bob? Was it Billy? And then sometimes I'll look at her, hell, I got 3 gems in this damn thing, So I keep notes like that from time to time, but I don't do outlines. My subconscious is doing all of the outlining. And when I get up in the morning, when my feet hit the floor, I'm generally like 99.9% ready. And when I get through, I'm done for the day. I don't think about it anymore, at least consciously. Once in a while, something will wiggle in there, but I don't know where it's going. I don't know how it's going to end necessarily. I sense those things. I don't know those things, but I allow that I sense to carry me forward. And I'm not saying that's the only way people should work. I'm saying that's what works for me. If outlining and structuring, in great detail works for you, then you're doing it right.
So we have a question from a fan, Maciek, who's a writer himself, a successful writer of comic books from Poland. But he says, when do you write comic book scripts? Do you do only the written version or draw it in storyboard form as well?
I only do the written version. I do it very much like a screenplay, except you don't have movement. If a guy reaches for a gun here in this scene, the next scene he's firing it. You're not, unless you're going to do like a series of flipboard shots where you're going to try to show just how fast this guy is and therefore develop something about the character and personality, then you have to think somewhat differently. And I remember, and this goes to one of your questions, I think, is that when I first started, every time I would go like from a novel to a short story, I had to get in a different mindset. And when I would go from that to a script, I had to get in a different mindset. And when I would go to that to a comic book script, I had to get in a different mindset, which might take 2 or 3 days. Now I didn't like that anymore. I've done it so much that I can pretty much just switch at will. It's not, but that's just from being around so damn long. What that's they call old.
Do you have by the way, I've wondered, do you actually have a favorite genre to write in? You write in so many different ones. Is there one that you'd say was the one you had the most fun with?
And I think most of the time I don't really write in a specific genre. I don't try to me, it's not good writing to say, I'm going to take a Western and I'm going to take a horror story and I'm going to put them together. It's good writing to blend. There's a difference in putting it in a blender and making a fruit salad, because then each thing is distinct. When it becomes a blend, it is what it is. And I always think I'm the Lansdale genre. You can certainly pick certain things of mine and say, okay, that fits horror, or that fits Western, whatever. But a lot of that, when you look at it more carefully, when people were doing volumes of my books and we're going to do the science fiction volume and we're going to do the horror volume, everybody was confused because they said, I'm not really sure what this is. And I think that's true of most of my work. Some of it fits more, carefully. But that's why I don't like to be called a horror writer or a crime writer or a Western writer, not because I'm not proud of those genres, not because I'm not proud of my work in that, but anytime you call me one of them, you're dismissing the rest of it. So I'm just a writer.
That's fair. And that's true. I hadn't thought about that, but like I'd say a lot of your stuff really is more than one genre when I read it, with the possible exception of some of your really dark mystery stuff, like The Bottoms, which I'm like, well, that's just dark as fuck mystery right there is what that is.
That one, and it has crime elements, has mystery elements. It has Southern Gothic. They teach it in universities, and things like that. So you never know what you're doing and what it's going to amount to, but I don't write for prosperity. I write like everybody I know is dead. I'm not writing for anybody other than me. Fuck the reader. And then when I get done with it, then I hope the reader likes it. Then I want to allure them back. I didn't really mean that thing I said about fucking the reader. But when you're creating something, you can't do that, And it's another thing I don't like about film, because you're forced to do that because they're giving you the money.
Yeah.
And they're supplying the actors. So that doesn't mean I don't like film, but that's a different thing. And so when I'm writing novels and short stories, they're mine. And when I write scripts, I write, if I'm going to write an original script, and most of mine have been adaptations, but if I was doing that, I'm going to write what I want. And then you get into that old part where they start telling you what you really meant. And a lot of times they're right, but if I only wrote scripts and only worked in film, I wouldn't give 2 cents for my soul, That's why I like being a pro. No offense. That's why I like being
exactly.
Yeah, these guys have to write their own scripts too. So
I wish you were as productive as you are with that stuff.
Yeah, I would give you a tenth of your productivity. I unfortunately I get all my ideas right as I'm falling asleep. Like the really good stuff where you're like, oh shit, I finally figured out how to do this. You've just got to be prepared to get up and type it on your phone before you go back to sleep.
Most of my stuff, like I said, I just get up in the morning, it's there. But once in a while, I will have something where I will wake up and I'll go up. But I consider that fun. I'm not considering that part of my day, and because I don't do it every day. But I found not long ago, I found a whole series of short stories I'd written and I didn't remember writing them, and I sold all of them. Yeah. So if Bill came into the house and wrote them, I'm sorry, he's not getting any royalties because he didn't put his name on them. But I'd forgotten I'd written them, because I did them for fun. It would just, or I would take a break when I was writing on the novel because I go, okay, I got my pages for the day. I got an hour. So I'd go in and, write. And the thing is if I felt that the story was pulling me, I would write more than 3 hours, but that works for me because I always think you should leave it with gas in the tank because the next day it starts up better. And if I go and have a day where I work, long hours, and I used to do that, then the next day I may not work. Next day or maybe 2 or 3 days because I've somehow spent all that time, all those hours. But if those pages come within that 3 hour context, then I don't feel the same. I'm not exhausted. And I feel like a hero every day because I know I'm going to get 3 to 5 pages. And if I get more, that's great. So I always have a feeling of success. At least to some degree. I mean, some things you write are harder than others, but hard work's not the same thing. That can be very satisfying. But I get to be a hero every day. That's really important to me as a writer.
Can you give an example of something you wrote that you remember was particularly hard for you to write during those 3 hours, and then why it was so hard for you?
I'm doing it right now. The novel I'm working on right now is the first one in since 1994. Or 3 that's given me this much trouble. And even that said, I'm 2 weeks within finishing it, and I'll finish it. It'll happen. But this is one of the rare, and that's why I said 98% of the time, the other time, because there's that other 2% where something comes in and go, no, it ain't gonna happen this time, baby. But I was working on it, and I just kept finding that the story was getting larger and larger and larger. So I just threw out about 150 pages. I never do that. And that's the other thing. You go with what you have to, but still I'm working 3 hours a day on it. It's just taking me more months than it usually does. But I don't have a set month for a novel. I just always start it in plenty of time to try to meet the contract. And I'm nearly always there early. But if I'm not, then I say, hey, you know what? We're gonna have to wait, because and it's sort of like when they're writing the check, you're writing the story, but it doesn't take any creativity to write the check. They can just wait till I get it. If you want to come in and write the story while I go write myself a check, well, maybe we can work something out. That's not a skill. And they don't even write checks anymore. The computer does.
So who inspires you?
Well, my wife is very important to me. We've been married for 48 years next month. And she's always been my biggest cheerleader. And, she and I met and we farmed for a while. We worked, I was talking about plowing with a mule and all that. We both did that. And then she got a degree in criminology. She became a university police officer. And then she became a dispatcher. And then she at the university for the police. And then she became a dispatcher at the fire department. And I was working as a janitor at that time. And I worked as a janitor about 7 years. And then, wrote in the morning, and my shift started at 2:30, I think, in the afternoon. And then it was all over at 10:30, 11:30 at night. I forget exactly. And then she was very inspiring because she was always encouraging me. And then when she wanted me to go full time, I had sold all this stuff. It looked great. And within a year, a lot of those things collapsed. But she kind of took care of me, and I was a house dad. I took care of the kids. And then within 7 years of that, I was doing so well that she went to work for me and has worked for me ever since.
Oh, wow.
That's a big inspiration. My parents were inspiring, and we were poor family, and my father couldn't read or write. He was illiterate, but he always inspired me. And sometimes I feel like I'm reading books for him, And there've been other people, certainly, but mostly what's inspired me outside of my family is other writers, and their creations. Reading Ray Bradbury or Raymond Chandler or F. Scott Fitzgerald or Ernest Hemingway or you name it. There's a long list. I could give you a list that would go from here until doomsday. But those are really in the most inspiring in another way. There's one, the other's supportive. But they're inspiring because I think, why can't I do that? How did he do that? How did she do that? And so it gives you a challenge. And I think that's one of the great, inspirations as well.
Have you ever written or thought about trying to co-write with one of your contemporaries a novel? I know some people like doing that. Obviously, Stephen King is pretty famous for doing that sort of thing. But is that something you've ever been interested in or have done yourself?
I have done some collaborations. I don't like it much. The thing I find with, I think screenplays are different. That's different because it's a collaborative art to begin with. And I don't believe in the auteur theory. I believe that no matter if you write it and direct it, there's somebody building those sets, which makes it look a certain way. There's somebody acting in it. You've got a DP, you got an AD, you got all these people, whether the person admits it or not, are influencing the look and the texture and the feel of that film. You're kind of like the general. You're keeping everybody, as a director, you're kind of keeping everybody there. And the producer provides you the money to have it. And you have so many things that are beyond your control, So that's maybe a little different. But in collaborations, my son and I have collaborated on comic book scripts. We've written I think a screenplay or so that we still have, we haven't finished because we do it part-time. And he adapted a screenplay based on a story of mine. So that's a collaboration of a sort, but I'm not in there meddling daily,
Right.
And my daughter collaborated on numerous short stories, and we had a collection of them come out called Terra Is Our Business, and it's about two ladies who solve super normal detective events, and they're a lot of fun. They're kind of funny, and they're a little bit traditional, and they're a little bit non-traditional. And so I've done it a little, and I've done it with some friends. But what I find most of the time in collaborations, and I separate this from film, because as I said about film is different, is that when you collaborate, you're trying to, if you're doing it right, you're trying to create a third entity that's not either one of you. Mm-hmm. But what happens is you put in all this stuff, and then they take all your good stuff out, and then you take all their good stuff out. And a lot of times what you end up creating is something either one of you could have done better alone. And like I said, there are exceptions. And my kids, we almost like share a brain. I can write and get up and go to the bathroom and come back, and Casey or Keith is writing, and it's like the same person. Mm-hmm. Then they can go to the bathroom, and I can sit down and just almost instantly, just sit down and do it. It's just there. I don't know what to say about that. And my wife and I have collaborated on a few things. That was a little messier.
One of our fans,
she knows it.
Well, our fan says, Mike says, when writing a screenplay, how do you know if you're spending too much time building the world before the story really starts? How do you decide what to edit to make a first act flow better?
Some of that for me is that, I don't study those things. Some of that for me is just having, grown up reading and watching films my entire life. I've developed a sort of understanding of that. And you know what? Sometimes I may be wrong. All I'm doing is the best I can each time out. And a variety of different people look at it. And if you worry about what other people are going to say, you can always find somebody that thinks you're doing it wrong. So you have to do it yourself and then see what can be done with it. If you get enough people telling you something sucks, then it might suck. But just because somebody thinks it sucks doesn't mean it does. But it's like reviews. If you believe the good ones, you got to believe the bad ones, because they're just somebody's opinion. So I judge it. If I get more good reviews, then I assume that I'm probably doing something right, because I'm appealing to enough people to keep me in sales and to keep me doing what I want to do. If I got nothing but bad reviews, then I might say, well, and I don't mean one book or one story, I'm talking about career-wise, then I might have to rethink it. But I think you can do that with a screenplay too. You need, the trick is this. I'll tell you, here's the way I think of it. Are you excited by it? And are you conning yourself that you're excited by it? And if you keep coming back to a point in your script where you keep stopping, there's something wrong with it. No matter how well it reads, it doesn't matter. There's something wrong because you're stopping there for a reason. And it may just be this most magnificent prose you've ever written, and you just don't need it. It's cutting it. I forget who was it said, kill your darlings. Was that Faulkner? But nonetheless, sometimes you have to shoot the darlings in the head and move the story forward. But it also depends on what kind of screenplay you're doing. Some screenplays, don't require that you worry about action as much. Others do. If what you want to do is fast-paced action adventure films, well, that's a different mindset than trying to do something that's maybe very reflective or introspective as film, as introspective as film can be. And it's a different mindset. So it's hard to answer that in any exact way, but the only advice I would give is make sure it's interesting to you, and don't think about other people when you're doing it. When you take that screenplay to others, then you have to deal with that. When I do a novel, I'm generally left to my own devices, but the editor may have some suggestions. But unlike film, if you say, I don't want to do that, I don't think that's a good idea, they don't insist. But a lot of times they'll have something, I'll go, you know what? That really makes a difference. I'm doing that. But who I love in publishing is the proofreader, because they find all my bad spelling, my missed commas, and things like that. So those are my favorite collaborators in a way. And they also, piss me off because they sometimes show me how stupid I am, but they also will sometimes piss me off because they're wrong. They'll go, well, this person's talking like this. Well, he's not a college professor. He's a guy. He's a woman. He's a person, and this is how they're talking in this scene. They're from East Texas, so they're going to sound like this. Things like that. I stick to my guns, but I'm always glad when they find inconsistencies or something like that, or an editor can make a suggestion that can make it better. Or if in film you take the script to the producer, the director more, and then the director, when they hand it over to the actor, an actor may look at it and say, I can't say that line. And they may be right. That line just may not find itself in their mouth. It just may not be comfortable there. Another actor might say it perfectly. But if you've got certain actors that you brought on board, you need to kind of listen to them without having them bully you. But you can't bully them either, I don't think, anyway. I think that you really shouldn't be, I think you have to accept that, as before, we were talking about film, it is a collaboration, it's different. And if an actor wants to play it a different way and it still works, or maybe even makes it better, you go with it. If it doesn't, then you can be a little bit more strenuous about how you would like it done. But I think that's a whole different can of worms, this film, whole different can of worms.
You had a lot of success with Jim Mickle adapting your work. And
Yeah.
I was just, is there something about your work that he understands or intrinsically is able to translate to film that you think other people may not get as right?
Yeah, I think it's really him and Nick D'Amici. They're partners, and Nick wrote the script for Cold in July. And there's not anything of mine that's ever been done that I don't have some complaint about, because maybe I'm an asshole, but it's also because it's mine first, and somebody else is like, did you really have to dress them up like that, But I have always felt that Jim and Nick and Don Coscarelli really got me. They really understood. They understood the tonality of the stories. They understood the subtext of the stories. And Nick D'Amici is great. He did the writing. And he's also a great actor. And he's not as well known as he should be, but he's really good. And so it was really, you have to consider that a collab, because they worked together on it. And other people wrote scripts too on the Happy Leonard series, including me and others. But Nick and Jim set the tone. And I think that's especially true with the first season, where they really seemed more cohesive. In the others, I thought there was more of an element of like, well, we're in TV now, and so it had that little bit of that going. But I was so fortunate in that whole series turned out to be quite good. But I wouldn't be honest if I didn't tell you I don't have quibbles and shit like that. And they know me, if you don't know me and I say something, people can get pissed off, but they know I know it's yours. I took the check. I got new shoes.
So the documentary that is about you is called All Hail the Popcorn King. That should be dropping very shortly. The film that your son wrote is called The Pale Door, that you produced. I just watched it today and really enjoyed it. Co-wrote it. Yep. And I liked it. It's a horror Western, and we still weirdly, despite the fact I feel like that's got a solid fan base, doesn't seem like people put out a lot of that. I've always wondered why. Huh?
But it doesn't have as big a fan base.
It should. It should.
It is
but
solid base, but it's solid and small,
But you have a new book out, More Better Deals, that I saw you've been promoting a lot. I've not gotten a chance to pick up a copy yet, but do you want to tell people what that's about?
Well, as much as I'm willing to reveal, but it's a crime novel, and it's very much it's noir, and it's very much in a James Cain tonality. But what I did is use that as a structure, and it takes place in the early middle 60s. But I use that to do my Lansdalean stuff within the context of it. And, I had so much fun, and the response to it's been terrific. So I'm hoping that people who want a good noir crime novel with humor, which doesn't usually go with noir, a lot of surprises, action, some violence, some mystery, some surprises, and pretty cool characters, then I'm hoping they're going to like that book.
I just read
other things out too, but that's the main one right now.
I just read your Hap and Leonard prequel edition with all the short stories of like the early days.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed that. Is there any plans to return to their world?
Yeah, I've got the novel I'm working on now, and then one other that I think both of those will be standalones. And then if publishing suits me and they're suited with me, then I will probably write more Hap and Leonard novels, because I love those guys. I mean, I've been with them for a long time, but I've never wanted a career of just writing any one thing. It's just not my nature. I like to experiment, because what happens, and it doesn't happen to everybody, but a lot of people, when they're doing the same thing over and over, it's not fun to them anymore. And you can sense it in the work or in the film, and it's just been there, done that, just put it on the screen. I got to go shit, and I just think it's important. It's important that you love what you do and that you're excited with what you do. And I hope there's never a point where I have to just, do something to do it. I mean, obviously I'm making a living here, and I'd peck shit with the chickens if my, family needed it or anything. But I don't find that. I'm doing what I want to do. I'm making good money. I'm happy. I'm successful in the way I want to be. And that's the thing, is to recognize when you're there, and not think you aren't there yet, and to enjoy the process as you go, because you'll look back on some of this, go, it was pretty cool. And you don't want to stay there. You want to constantly be creatively interesting, and all of us want to make a living, and we want to make a good one. But I feel like I'm living the American dream, which really isn't about being rich. It was just about having got a roof over your head, you can pay your bills, and you've got a good job. And to me, I've got greater than that, because I have a job I love to get up and do. And I hope to die with my nose in this keyboard, because or on the martial arts mat. I've got a few more years there. I'm getting older and stuff, and I don't take falls anymore and throws and stuff. I had to retire from that because I'll be 70 next year, and so I just think it's the best life that I could have ever had. I had certain things I wanted to do when I was a child, and that's what I did. I had to do other things along the way that I didn't want to do, but I actually achieved exactly what I wanted to do. And I learned early on, there's that whole thing about, if you can't be happy with what you got, you're not going to be happy with what you want. And so all that other stuff is just icing on the cake. It just makes that better. But you got to focus on that, or you look up and you're 70, 80 years old, and you're always going to feel like there's a hole you're trying to fill. And mine's filled, In fact, mine runneth over, and I'm okay with that. And I'm still ambitious in the sense of creativity. There are things I want to do that I haven't done. And as long as my mind's good and my body is physically able, then I'm going to do those things. And I think you have to do that, because toward the end, you may not be able to do those things. So at least if you've lived that life that you meant to live, and you've enjoyed the moments and stages that you're in, it means something. I don't know how many people I know, they're still waiting for their ship to come in, and they've already sailed on it. If you do that, the pier will collapse. It's never going to come in. But I think it really matters to know what you're doing, when you're doing it, and to appreciate it, even when it's hard. And that doesn't mean you don't have ambitions. You got to learn from the past, live in the moment, and plan for the future. And for some people, that's really difficult, and I understand that. But for me, that's what's worked for me. And I'm no sage. I'm just telling you what works for me. It may not work for you. It just
you're more of a writer of the Purple Sage, if you will.
Yeah, I'm a writer. I'm a writer of the Purple Wage, because I've certainly written a lot of things about things I'm mad about in society, and some of that's in More Better Deals too, even though it's sort of looks just like a crime novel until you start reading it.
I love when you go off on idiots. That's my favorite. Just like, why are you so stupid? Love it. Anyway, Joe, thank you. This has been a pleasure once again.
Thank you so much.
It's nice meeting you boys. And, I'd like to know more about what you're doing.
Oh, we'll get in touch. Yeah.
Do so. Maybe we'll find something we can do together. Wouldn't that be cool?
That'd be amazing.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
Why don't you say the name of your...
I'm sorry?
Where do you live?
Oh, we live in Austin.
Perfect.
Yeah, Texas.
For cities, that's my favorite city. That and probably Torino and London. Those are my favorite cities, but I'd rather live in the woods. I just like to go visit.
Well, what's the name of y'all's website you can send them to? Anybody wants to check out your work?
GrandSchemeProductions.net.
GrandSchemeProductions.net.
Yes.
All the Summers Brothers works. Several of your short films are on there, right?
Yeah. And then our latest one, which is at festivals, just, email us or something. Do you have his email? Maybe we can send him an email.
Yeah.
We'll send you an email with links.
Yeah, that'd be all right.
But Joe, thank you. You've already
so much.
This is like the 5th or 6th time we've sat down with you, and you're always so generous with your time.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad to. And that's the other thing too, is that if you've learned anything, you want to share it, and it may not be for everybody, but it might be for somebody. And that's what you want to do. Is I don't want to be anybody's guru, and I'm not not looking to be your evangelist or anything like that. But if I can help people and it doesn't disrupt my life to the zero effect, I'm okay with it.
Fair enough. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll be back next week with I don't know what yet, but I'm working on it. Thanks to the Summers Brothers as well, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks again.